Well, welcome everyone to our webinar this evening, Building Better with Insulated Concrete Forms, or ICFs for short. I'm Fine Home Building Editorial Director Andrew Zoellner, and I'll be your host and moderator for the evening. I'd like to thank Nudura for being tonight's sponsor. Nudura is part of the Tremco Construction Products Group and a manufacturer of insulated concrete forms. To kick off the evening, I'll direct everyone to the chat box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. That's where you can answer questions or ask questions and talk amongst yourselves. If you wanted to try it out, we'd love to know where you're dialing in from this evening. And then when you do have questions for the panelists, you can type those in the Q&A box. So the chat box is different than the Q&A box. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce our panelists this evening. First, we have Mike Guertin, one of our Fine Home Building favorites. Mike's written more than 100 articles for Fine Home Building and appears in all kinds of videos for us. Mike's a builder and remodeler out of Rhode Island, and after 35 years, he's still challenged every day to find more efficient ways to build things better. Then we have Walt Tomala of TNT General Contracting. Walt is joining us a little bit last minute due to a presenter change. So Walt, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Walt Tomala. I'm a builder remodeler based out of Westfield, Massachusetts. Started it right out of high school. Been doing it for 28 years. It's TNT General Contracting, a build, design, educate firm. We work with a lot of trade schools. We're all about the education, whether it's us learning something, our clients learning something, our employees, to make our job sites go better, more efficient, smarter. And we love working with new products and creating and finding new ways to just do things better.
I'm excited to talk with you tonight. And finally, we're joined by Keegan Still, Category Manager for Nudura ICF. He's responsible for ensuring Nudura is properly addressing the changing needs of the marketplace as it relates to Nudura product line offerings. Keegan joined the company in 2007 in a product development and technical support role. And in this role, he supported distributors, architects, engineers, building officials, and construction professionals through the construction process using ICFs, ICF accessories, and the insulation products Nudura offers. Thank you all for joining us tonight. With that said, let's jump into it. So I've got a few questions to start us off here, and you guys can feel free to jump in wherever. But the first talking point I'd like to talk about is, what is an ICF? What does it stand for? And then in particular, I'm curious, Mike and Walt, when did they kind of come up on your radar?
So Keegan, why don't you take the describing what the category is, and then Walt and I can take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll take the starting part about there. What is an ICF? So ICF stands for insulated or insulating concrete forms. So in a very basic state, it is two panels of EPS foam, expanded polystyrene foam, that is connected together with a polypropylene web, we call them, that course through the center between the panels to hold them together. And those webs come in different thicknesses or widths to allow you to get a thicker concrete core. So the standard core thicknesses are anywhere from 4-inch to 12-inch thicknesses, depending upon what the project is that you're building. So the standard form, as I said, EPS foam, they're 2 5/8-inch thicknesses on either side of that concrete core. And those standard forms, standard straight forms, they're 8 feet long, 18 inches high. So basically 12 square feet of form in one placement. So that's very basic on what a actual insulated concrete form is. Many different shapes and sizes that are available. So as I mentioned, the standard straight form for obviously straight, your straight walls in your building. We have 90-degree corners, 45 degrees. We do, custom cut radius. There's brick ledge form. So really, to suit any design that's required on the build. So that's sort of just a basic overview of what the form actually is.
And so, Mike, you've been working with ICFs for a while now. When did they kind of first pop on your radar?
I started looking into them when they first came out back in the, well, maybe not when they first came out, but when they started getting a lot of notoriety. You know, anytime a new product category comes on the market, a lot of companies are developing and coming up with ideas and throwing them out there. And the mid 90s was that period that we saw. There was probably at least 24 different companies. Some were just little mom and pops, and then there were some established expanded polystyrene companies that were getting into it. And so that's when I jumped in and looking around, just figure out what every company had its own block, its own system, and there was no uniformity in size or how they went together. And it's since then settled down. So I started building with them, I'd say in 98 or 99. And my friend Rick Arnold, we were business partners at the time, and we built, it was probably 5 or 6 houses with them, right from the foundation right up through the roof framing. And then I haven't done as many in the last number of years, mainly because I haven't had clients asking for them, whereas they had been on the client's radar back then in the early 2000s. But I have, just because I like it, the system, been using them for all the foundations, both for remodeling. There's some advantages there on small project remodeling additions, for garages, for, you know, small garages where you want to do the form work yourself and can't get a forms company in, and for foundations for the houses.
Very cool. And then, Walt, you've had some experience with ICFs too?
Yeah, back in 2006, I was my local president for the 2008 market crashed. So I got to play with them for about 2 years, and then they kind of fell off of a lot of the radars. We had a few other concrete companies that teamed up with us and aligned with us. And, you know, like Mike said, you know, when you're doing small projects and it's hard to get a concrete company to come in, these made perfect sense. So I did do a couple foundations, one for myself thereafter. But yeah, it was 2006 when I started to mess around with some ICF forms. And yeah, I really like the way they went together. So they're fun to work with.
So speaking of messing around with ICF forms, you know, what are they like to build and work with, and maybe some of the pros and cons versus, you know, traditional concrete forms? I think you hit one of those on the head, is that sometimes you can't get a traditional concrete form company to work with you.
One of the things I've noticed, and I noticed it right away, was initially when Rick and I got involved, we called concrete forms companies thinking they were the natural match for installing them. And what we discovered is they were a little reluctant, and the skill set that we had as framers and carpenters actually fit working with ICFs a lot better, because you're cutting them with woodworking tools and then stacking them up isn't really a problem. Working with rebar, we hadn't done a lot of that, but, you know, learn as you go. So it was you know, for contractors who would like to try them, don't be afraid that you don't have experience with concrete. I know that isn't exactly the question you asked, but I think it, the idea of
and you're just talking about the, you know, starting off and sort of the education part of it. And I mean, Nudura has always been really big on education. We do have a training program for installers to learn how to use the forms. So that is a 1-day training program that we do offer, and that's really just to, you know, help you understand, you know, really what it's like to build with ICF, how to start into that, you know, from brand new, you know, going into the course, learning right from the footing right up to the roof and everything in between. Because of the pandemic, that is something that we made available online. So that is available too, you know, on our website. So as I said, Nudura has been big on education, and so that is available for first-time users.
I think that's great. I mean, that's a key component. Back in 2006, when I was starting out with them, it was a couple conversations with the manufacturer and just kind of like, get your hands dirty. We're going to send you a few pieces to play with, to do a mock-up, to make sure you're comfortable. But then we're just going to send you out the foundation package, and we'll have a rep available for a conversation or to stop out the site, you know, if you have any issues. So the fact that you have that training in place, Keegan, is huge. I think, you know, when we start to mess around with products like this and we try things, especially for my company, I like to in-house stuff first so that I have knowledge of what goes into it in case I do sub it out later. Because as a general contractor, it's our job to know something about all of our subs so that we can just make sure we're on the same page. But they then get down into the specifics and know all the details. But we've got to know enough to be dangerous. And I always like to make sure that if a sub's not available or whatever, if timeline changes and they can't get there, that my team can step in and start the process and keep our schedule moving. So ICFs really allow us to do that. And like Mike said, you know, it really is designed for a carpenter in that trade. It's really easy to transition that. Whereas our concrete guys, the same thing. They're like, I really don't want to mess with those. They're not 8 foot by 2 foot forms, and there's not steel pins that hold it together. So what am I doing here?
So, you know, you mentioned on one of the pros of the insulated concrete form is, you know, that someone who can use woodworking tools can put them together and learn how to put in your foundation. You know, the other part of the concrete form, the insulated part of it, I think is something a lot of folks are interested in, especially as they're thinking about spending more time in their basement or even building a tighter envelope all the way up to the roof.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I was just going to say, Andrew, as you said that, you know, there's a lot of conversation obviously about the foundation. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest misconceptions about ICF is that it is strictly a foundation product. And, you know, that's obviously how ICF started, with it being a concrete wall. You know, naturally you think of the foundation, but, you know, a lot of those benefits come from building right up to the roof. That's where you really get those insulation values, and it really where the ICF starts to work for you in those. So that would be sort of the one big misconception with ICF, is that, you know, you're not limited to a below grade application with the product.
You asked Andrew a little while ago some of the pros of ICFs. And one of the big ones for the clients we got initially were they wanted their house to be very durable and resistant in high wind zones. And the wind resistance we could get out of ICFs exceeded anything we could do with wood frame construction. Even with all the shear panels and all the anchors that tie the building down, all of that was just built into the fact that the ICFs are built out of concrete, so it's steel and concrete with the reinforcing. And there have been several houses, if you go and look at any of the research, that were built with homes that were built with ICFs down in Florida, and during hurricanes or even during tornadoes, they've performed extremely well. Above grade exposure, sure, there's damage on the outside, but the occupants on the inside, as long as the roof stays on, they're protected from flying debris and everything else.
I think that's a great point. You know, there are a lot of benefits, especially structurally, to building above grade with ICFs. You know, are there other advantages above grade? You know, like I'm thinking about specifically maybe in cities, infill lots, closer together. It seems like having all that mass in your exterior walls would make for a pretty quiet structure.
For sure. You definitely get high STC ratings with a insulated concrete form, and that's a huge advantage to using in those type of applications. If you're near a airport or a highway or something like that, it really really dampens that sound. And that's one of the biggest things. Every time I go into an ICF building, structure, home, you just notice how quiet it is, and it's amazing, and you don't really understand it until you're actually going into that building and just how quiet that is. So definitely a huge advantage there.
One of the things I just ran into recently, I was visiting a house that was just riddled with termite damage. Now I'm in southern New England, not a typically known area for termite damage, but we're noticing more and more termite activity. And that's not just where we are, it's in a lot of parts of the country. Above grade with ICFs, you don't have that until you get to the roof anyway. You don't have a lot of wood frame that you have to worry about, provided that you've got good termite shields to block off any of the termites that are getting up into the wall portion. As long as you can pay attention to any of that activity at the ground level, they're not going to be able to sneak in to get into the floor systems or the roof system.
Keegan, that's a quick question for you on that as far as these systems go, because it's been a while, 2006 till now that I've used them. What does your product, because obviously termites will channel into an XPS and everything else. Do you guys have anything that's formulated into your panel so that it prevents that or that deters that?
So we do have a product available with Preventol in the foam. So it's not part of our standard form lineup, but it is available, and that is to deter termites from entering the foam. Really, there's really no benefit to the termite in going into the foam. It's not like they're eating it as they would with wood. But we do have options available for deterring the termites.
Gotcha.
I'm curious if you were going to do that and use those the Nudura blocks that do have the treatment. Would you have to go all the way up with the walls, or would you just do like one course, say just above grade, figuring that once they hit that, it serves as a barrier, and that way above that you could just use standard block without worrying about it?
Yeah, typically what I've seen is that they'll do the first two courses, depending if it's a slab on grade in southern US. Really, they would do two courses, those first two courses. I've seen others where they'll do the whole building. So I think it's really to the preference of what they're looking for. But it seems like those first two courses is sort of the way that people are going with it.
Great. So, we've heard a little bit about ICFs. I'm hoping you can talk a little bit more about, working with them, especially, how do windows and doors work in a concrete wall? And then, attaching your exterior cladding and your interior finishes and electrical and plumbing lines.
Go ahead, Mike. Why don't you jump on first? You've done a few more,
Okay.
and then I'll fill in.
So the way I've always done it, as long as you plan out your rebar locations, which you're going to need vertical and horizontal rebar, as long as you plan those out so they're not passing through a window or door, we'll usually just block up the whole wall. So it's just a straight up wall. And then we take it, maybe Keegan, you could tell me I'm doing it wrong. We'll go in with now a battery operated chainsaw, and you just chainsaw out the opening, and then we buck it out. And there are products that are made for that. I believe Nudura has systems that can do that, or you can do it out of just inserting some 2x stock into the form, and then you just block it up and brace it inside of your opening, be it a door or a window. Are there specific products that you guys have that are made for bucking out windows and doors?
Yeah, there definitely is, Mike. We've got a great product. It's from Pre-Buck. It's available through our Nudura distributors. It's an LSL material, laminated strand lumber. So it's just a nice, straight, flat lumber, not like what you'd see with your traditional dimensional lumber. But we would cut those windows and doors in as we're building, course by course. The reason you would do that is that you do require lintel steel around those openings. So you're going to be, you obviously have to have those openings specifically where they are on the plans, and then you're going to be building that lintel. So you require bottom bars, 2 vertical bars at your side, and then whatever the span is over the top, you're going to be building a stirrup within the wall. So it would be important to build those as you're going.
Now, when I built, I've always just gone up 1 story at a time when I'm pouring. And that way, if the stirrups you're talking about, which is basically a shaped piece of rebar that is supporting a couple horizontal rebars that forms essentially the header that would go
Correct.
over a window or door.
Correct.
We'll usually do that after we cut the opening out, just because we got our staging up, we can drop it in from the top. But do you see some builders that are going multi-story before they, as they go and then pour, say, 20 feet tall, or are they going up one story at a time?
Yeah, so typically it's going to be a single story. I mean, the biggest thing there is that you do have to vibrate that concrete to make sure that it's fully consolidated. Typically, you're going to build to a floor line, so whether that be 10 or 12 feet, and then pouring from there. The requirement is, according to ACI standards, is a lift of concrete is 4 feet an hour. So basically, you're going to pour 4 feet around the building, and then you can continue on in lifts up to the top of the wall. And then you would vibrate that concrete as you're going. And typically the whip on those vibrators, your standards are probably 10 or 12 foot long. So in order to get right down in there to the base of that wall, you don't want to go any taller.
Now, what's your thought, opinion? What's the industry practice when it comes to vibrating? Because I've vibrated 4 different ways, but often I'm doing it from the outside with like a wall banger on the outside, vibrating the outside. So I got a couple guys down as we're bringing up our lifts. They're working the inside and the outside face with I don't know if it's even available now, the Archie wall banger. I got a bunch of those. And then we'll also use just mallets and tapping on the forms. We also will drop in the vibrator primarily around window and door openings to get the concrete to go in underneath a window sill to fill the blocks underneath, because it doesn't necessarily move horizontally as if you've got a wide opening to fill that whole area up. So is it necessary that we use a tube style vibrator, or can we do it from the outside?
You're going to want internal vibration on that. So you'd use a pencil vibrator in the cavity of the wall. I know that those wall brader or Harvey, whatever you call it there, that the surface vibrators, I mean, they're not, maybe in some specific areas, but it's always going to be internal vibrating is what we require.
I guess I'm displaying the age that when I got into concrete ICFs, that there just wasn't a lot of the equipment that we can get nowadays. The vibrators back then were plug-in, and the job sites didn't have, they were, you had to plug it in. The power wasn't available on the job site, so we did what we could to get that done. Nowadays, with battery operated tools, it makes it a lot easier.
Right.
Yeah, Mike, and you should never feel bad about that. I mean, from how long ago we started using these things, the technology's come a long way. But same thing, we're doing exactly that on the processes that and projects we worked on was an internal vibrator, and you just had someone following the concrete, and you're doing it, every foot as you're going along, just to make sure that everything floats smoothly around windows and door openings. You have 2 guys that are from New England here, so like we're probably not getting these big spans of doors and everything else. I do want to talk about that. I want to pick Mike's brain on that as well, because the 2 houses that I did were pretty standard colonial New England style houses. So 3-foot windows, 6-foot doors for sliders and such. But Mike, have you done some of these with some larger openings?
Yeah, and usually once we get into larger openings, we're just blocking back, leave the full opening, and then we're setting in engineered lumber for our beams into the floor system or into the wall system, depending on what the architectural plan calls for, because I think there is a limit to how far we can span with the stirrups and the rebar to create that internal header in the concrete. I don't know, Keegan, are there limits on that?
So Nudura does have lintel tables available that are engineered stamped. So you'd be able to use those for designing your lintels for the project. Now those go up to 20-foot width of opening. If it's something more than that, obviously, we need to get engineer involved. But that's going to cover most all your openings anyway. So.
And then, how about attaching interior finishes and exterior cladding?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I can touch on that, Andrew. So within the form, and as I mentioned at the start, there's the polypropylene webs that course through the center of where the concrete would be, your concrete core. On the ends of that are fastening strips that are embedded in the foam. So they're buried 5/8 of an inch from the surface of the foam. On the Nudura forms, they're noted as a diamond pattern that's embedded or embossed right in the foam, so you know where they are. They run full height of the form, and they're every 8 inches on center. So once you build that wall up, you're going to have all of those fastening strips in alignment, and you can use those fastening strips for attachment of your interior finish. So you can screw your drywall directly into the fastening strips on the inside, and then on the outside. If you do require, depending on which finish you choose, you can use those fastening strips for, say, brick ties if you're doing a brick veneer or whatever other finish you might choose.
And Keegan, it makes sense, especially with a brick veneer for this product. We're putting a lot of rain screens on our houses now with 3/4 inch furring. How are you guys addressing that in your system?
As far as installing?
Are you just using furring strips and such on the outside of that?
Yep, yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of that depends on the finish. I mean, if you're doing like a wood siding or something, you're going to want, a furring strip on that on the wall. So yeah, you would screw those directly into the fastening strips, and then you'd attach your finish to that to provide that channel in behind.
The only type of siding that I've had a problem installing over ICFs is cedar shingles, whether it's red or whites or yellows. And in that case, we end up, just because it's the nature of the beast, you got to put sheathing over it. So there's no getting around that. But with any type of lap siding, whether it's vinyl, fiber cement, or any sort of a composite siding, the lap siding goes right on. And the nice thing about the strips is you can nail into them with a ring shank nail, or you can or screw it in. It holds real well.
So I know one of Fine Home Building's favorite topics right now are sort of wall assemblies and moisture barriers. And I'm curious if does the foam count as a moisture barrier on the exterior of an ICF?
So it's kind of a hot topic with the whole WRB or weather resistant barriers. And so, according to the building code, ICFs do not require an additional barrier to be installed. There's a couple exceptions in the code in which we don't require that additional barrier. However, that doesn't mean that in every instance you shouldn't at least consider one, or depending upon your finish, you may, depending on the manufacturer of that finish and their installation instructions, they may require an additional barrier to go on. And that's something that Nudura has available through Tremco, which is our EnviroDry product. So it's a liquid applied product that goes right over the wall and provides that additional barrier if you do require it. So we do have that product available if you do.
And waterproofing below grade, does Tremco have a system for doing any of the forms that are set below grade?
We do, Mike. Yep. So we do have a peel and stick membrane that go below grade. And you'd require that everywhere where you have your interior floor is below your exterior grade line is where you require that membrane. And we also do have a liquid applied membrane as well. So really giving you the options on which product you want to choose or work with. And then also on top of that, if you want to use a protection board or a drainage and protection board, those are available from us as well. So we have that complete system to be able to provide you, and giving you options, like I said, the peel and stick or liquid, whatever the installer chooses to use.
That's great. That's a one-stop shop. Mike, I don't know about you, but I was using like a dimple mat on the outside of mine for below grade and getting it into the perimeter drains. I would always do inside outside perimeter, and then stone. But I found that was the best solution for me.
Yep, that's exactly what I did. We use a sheet membrane over the forms, and then we would put the dimple mat on. That way we get the capillary break, so you're not putting the soil in direct. I mean, even though we've got a waterproof membrane there, you want to protect it, so it's a cover board, and it also provides that capillary break to let water drain through. Yeah, so
Right.
belt and suspenders, you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think a lot of it too depends on what the backfill material that you're
that's true.
using as well, right? So
In New England, we got a lot of very moisture soils that hold a lot of moisture, at least in my area. The glacier didn't leave us with some nice gravel, at least in most of the places I work.
So we've got a handful of questions here in the Q&A. One of the ones that's sort of the top of everyone's mind right now is, the cost of building materials and the difference in cost between an ICF build and a wood frame build. And specifically right now, I don't have any numbers off, in front of me, but it seems like the difference in cost is almost negligible these days.
You're definitely right, Andrew. And I think a lot of it is sort of regional. Depending on numbers, they can sort of fluctuate, but definitely with the state of lumber and the increases in pricing there has put us right in line with what we would see with traditional building methods as far as pricing goes.
When I was doing most of my building with ICFs, it would cost us about 15% more for comparable walls once you factored in all of the materials and insulation. Because a lot of people think, it costs more, but they're only looking at the wall frame and comparing it to the ICFs. They're not considering the wall frame plus air sealing plus the insulation. But when you aggregate those together, it still cost a little more back then. My gut feeling is it's probably on par or maybe even a little bit less, depending on how much you're paying for concrete and how much it's going to cost you what your availability is of ICFs locally. One of the biggest costs we found was the shipping costs. 20 years ago, ICFs were not stocked locally to where I am. Now Nudura is, as well as another company. So I can get those at a much cheaper price now than I could buy them 20 years ago because they're getting tractor trailer truckloads on a regular basis. So the economy of transportation is down.
For sure. Well, and that's a nice thing about the Nudura forms, that they actually fold flat for shipping. So you eliminate, trucking right now is also, expensive for shipping materials, right? So, the fact that our forms do fold flat, you're not shipping, dead air to the job site. You can get a lot more product in a truck. So a huge advantage there.
Great. So kind of the last question I have for our panelists before we dive into more questions here is, is there anything you wish you knew about ICF construction before you use them for the first time? What's the advice you'd give for somebody who's curious and wants to do a project?
YouTube has been a huge help with new products. Let me tell you, anytime I can get on and watch somebody that's already done it is extremely helpful. I think some of just the way, we spray foam down our first panel now to your splice seams and some of your rebar clips. I mean, Nudura has some great through wall anchors for when you're doing T-bracing and your corners and such. I mean, that was really impressive. I wish I had those the first time I messed around with ICFs, because I think I would have used the word constructed with ICFs instead of messing around, because it was definitely a whole lot different. So that's definitely one of my first takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, the YouTube is great for that, right? There's a ton on there, and we're always putting out, fresh new content. So it's a great resource, that's for sure.
So we've had some questions about, what you need to do to prepare for pouring your concrete, and specifically about bracing. Could you kind of go through strategies there, kind of what's recommended?
Yeah, sure. So we do have a bracing alignment system that would go on the wall prior to pour. So what that provides is you're obviously being able to support that wall, align that wall after the concrete pour, but it also gives you a walk platform for pouring the wall. So it's sort of a all-in-one system, if you will. Use that platform for pouring, and then once the concrete is poured, walls poured, you can adjust the turnbuckles to provide the alignment on that wall. So that's a system that we do have available as well.
When you say available for purchase, or available for loan, or available for rent?
So a lot of our distributors will have them either for purchase or for rent. So depending upon how many projects you're doing, it might be invitational to purchase the bracing. But if you're only doing a single project or something like that, then the rental option is available as well.
So I'm a minimalist when it comes to shoring and bracing. What I found initially when I started doing ICFs, you're kind of scared. You're working with concrete walls that are the first job I did, they were 14 feet tall.
Okay.
On a step down bank. It was a sloping grade, steep slope down to the ocean, and we braced the heck out of it and staged the heck out of it. And then over time, I noticed how little we actually needed. Got to the point where I can, and that's one of the reasons I can, with my brother, he and I could stack them up and be pouring in a good sized house in like 2 days, much quicker than we could actually frame wood walls with just two of us, because we didn't spend a lot of time bracing. So we use steel track, just from steel stud system, and we would use those as our vertical braces and put those, we space them 8 feet apart, put a 2x block inside of the top of it, and then we use our regular form aligners that we use for our wall bracing when we're doing wood frame construction, stakes in the ground, and that would be our braces, maybe every 8 to 12 feet. And then for staging, we would just use our A-frames or something else and have those separate, so it was an integrated system to keep the top of the blocks straight. Most of the blocks, like I know Nudura, I noticed the foam walls are 2 5/8, which matches 2.5 inch or 2 5/8 inch steel track. So you can actually take steel track, drop it on top, and it does two things. One, if you overlap those tracks by say 2 or 3 feet as you work your way down with the 10 footers, it helps to stiffen and straighten out the forms. And it also protects all of the keyways. So all of the notches that they're going to interlocks are not going to get filled up with concrete. The other way to do it is to put some tape on top. So I found that I wouldn't do it the first time out, follow a system, with the bracing, everything first time out. But then as you do a couple of jobs and learn what the limits are, you can probably do a little bit less and less.
I love the sounds of that, because everybody listening is going to look at me and be like, Walt, you're crazy. I'm that guy that's like every 4 feet, I got a brace. I remember that first form that we did. I felt like, oh my God, I think I spent as much in lumber and bracing and everything else as I did in concrete or the forms. But it was just because I was a nervous Nelly. And Mike, it's great to hear the spans that you were getting. I think that now if we're doing them, it's every 6 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet. And it should be about a 6 foot for your walk plank is what we set up for the last one that we did. But yeah, Mike, that was great tips. I love hearing that, because I'm like, we're going to try that one next time.
But only do it after you've done a few and how far you can go. Don't dive in and just minimally brace, and you don't want that problem. If you're not familiar with working with concrete and how it behaves, you don't want to take that risk of under bracing, at least the first few jobs.
Yeah.
So I think that's something obviously you learn with experience. The training, that we provide obviously helps out. And then we do have, distributors in the local regions that do provide, support to the projects and can come out and, provide some some support or on site, help you out if you have any questions. So I think that really helps as well to sort of, I think the first time is maybe scary, but we have a lot of support that's there to help with that.
So speaking of concrete, does it always need to be pumped, and is there a special type of mix required or recommended?
So yes, typically you're going to use a concrete pump for pouring the concrete. A lot of the ready mix suppliers will have an ICF mix, although it is not really much different than a standard concrete mix, if you will. Typically looking for a 6-inch concrete slump is what we typically recommend with the concrete.
And in addition to so you do need a pump if you're going to be doing elevated walls. So one thing that we've found with, particularly with small jobs, we're going to do an addition, be it just the foundation, or be it that we're doing a wall. We can use line pumps, which are much less pricey on getting those to the job site. Of course, then you're going to need a different mix that'll go through the small pipe. The advantage there is we're not getting a crane a pump boom up and over the houses and around all the electric wires. We can actually pull it around the lawn without doing any damage. Concrete truck with the hopper in the front yard, driveway, or even on the street, and then just run that line around the back. So it's good to find a good pump operator, be it that you're going to be using a boom pump or a line pump. Those guys, most of the ones that I've worked with have worked with ICFs before, so they understand what it is you need, and they understand what you need for controls. Then you just have to work out the communication between the people that are actually placing the concrete, probably you or your crew, and then the operator too, because you need to know what hand signals you're going to use and what means what.
Right. Yeah.
Another question here in the Q&A, asking, a couple of them asking sort of about insulation and R value and adding additional insulation, and can you do that? Should you do that? I think, Keegan, the R value is sort of determined on the size of the block and the size of the foam on the outside.
So our standard forms will give you an R24. And then we do have means of providing additional insulation. So we do have what we call our XR35 form. So that's giving you an R26.25 once you factor in the finish and the concrete and the exterior finish. So I mean those options are available. We have other options of inserts in the concrete or providing additional foam on the outside of our standard form. So there are options of providing additional insulation to meet whatever requirements the project might require. Is it required or is it necessary? I think that's sort of the age-old debate. How much, and it's sort of that law of diminishing returns, right? I mean, how much insulation are you going to put on there? Is it money better spent somewhere else? Maybe better windows, or something like that, right? So typically our standard R24 is going to give you enough as far as the insulation value, in our mind, anyways. But you do have those options available for additional foam.
And I've used aftermarket foam that I can get locally. I've also used mineral wool, rigid mineral wool, and put that, or stone wool, and put that on the outside. So there, with those embedded plastic that's in the form themselves, you can attach your exterior insulation, or you can put it on the interior, I guess, as well. Not going to do any harm, and it works just fine. So you can get as much as you want insulation. There's no limit to that.
Right.
Another kind of insulation air sealing question. Paul asked, I hear an ICF can be too tight. Is that a thing? And if that's a thing, is air circulation required or mechanical ventilation required in ICF foams?
So there's a simple answer to that, and that is that the ICFs are going to be tighter than maybe a wood frame. But if you're meeting the energy codes that we have nowadays, where you can have for most of North America, except if you're in zones 1 or 2, you're going to need to be at 3 air changes per hour or less. And at that point, the code requires anyway that you have fresh air ventilation. So ICF or regular construction, when you're into high performance building, which ICFs fall into that category anyway, you're going to be airtight and you're going to ventilate, and that's minimum code. So,
Right.
That's just what we do.
Great. Just looking through a couple other questions here. That's, agent, question always popular. Let's talk about vapor barriers on the interior. What do you need to do, in New England?
So, Keegan, you
You want me
can.
to? Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
No,
I'll let you take this one because I
Yeah,
know
no,
what the
for
answer
sure.
is, but go ahead.
Yeah, so with an ICF, you do not require additional vapor barrier on the inside. So that is not required. The EPS foam is providing that barrier for you. So as I said before, no additional barrier on the outside unless the finish requires it, or you're in a specific region where you might want to put a WRB on, and then similar on the inside. I mean, you don't require that additional vapor barrier on the inside. So you're going to be putting your drywall directly on the foam and fastening it directly into our fastening strips.
So the whole reason for vapor control in conventional wood construction is to avoid the potential or avoid condensation inside the wall cavities. You don't have a wall cavity. You don't have moisture sensitive materials, either the foam or the concrete. So it's a non-issue. Don't have to worry about it. You could hang up bare drywall and not even put anything on it, and it'll be fine. The moisture vapor will move through the foam. It'll move through the concrete in both directions. So just condition the inside, keep yourself comfortable, and you're all set.
There you go.
Another question here about rebar. Steel's the standard choice, but are other materials acceptable?
Definitely, Andrew. Yeah, for sure. And the one thing that we've just recently come out with is fiber tables for the use of for Euclid. So Euclid is a sister company to Nudura. We teamed up with Euclid to put together engineered fiber dosage tables for the use of those. So they're macro fibers or microfibers. Synthetic fibers is what they are, and not the steel fibers. But we do have those engineered dosage tables for the use of those fibers within our walls. So that's definitely a great option. Eliminate.
Can you explain what those fibers are and how they're used and how they're incorporated into the ICFs?
Yeah, for sure. So the fibers are actually mixed within the concrete. So that's mixed at the ready mix plant to the dosage required for the project. And it'll arrive to the site with the fibers already in the concrete. So it's eliminating your horizontal and vertical steel within your wall. So you think about speed of construction. You're eliminating a lot of those. Eliminating a lot of the labor involved with installing steel.
And would that fiber also take the place of the vertical bars on either side of an opening and the lintel bars that we're putting over openings?
So there are still typical spots where you do require the steel, even when using the fiber. So you will around your openings, your lintels, and then at your corner, you will have corner bar. But you are replacing basically the reinforcement in the sort of the field of the wall, if you will.
So in the open walls, you're probably cutting back by half or 2/3 the number of bars that we're putting in the wall. And the price of steel today, that could be a pretty big savings. I don't know what the cost of the fiber is, but my guess is it's probably going to be a net savings compared to the labor and materials for the steel.
Yeah, we started going to the fiber reinforced concrete probably 3-4 years ago, and we use it on every project now just for that savings by all means.
So we touched on this a little bit. The benefits of ICFs when you're trying to resist wind. Do they offer any benefits against fire?
Yeah, so we do have a 4-hour fire rating with the form. So that's a 6-inch form with 1/2-inch drywall on both sides. So that is a ULC listed wall assembly. So yes, you do achieve that 4-hour fire rating with the Nudura walls.
So and some people, I'm sort of preempting some questions that might come in. Is the foam itself a combustible material?
It would be considered combustible. Now there is a fire retardant in the foam that is required by law, if you will, that it's in there. Basically, the foam is going to melt, but it does not. If you hold a match to it, it's going to melt. If you pull it away, it's not going to continue to burn, right? So it's self-extinguishing, if you will.
So what I've noticed is that when I've seen photographs and read reports on after fire events and with ICF homes, is that, just like you say, it's not fuel for the fire, it just melts. So what you see after a fire is the structure there, and it's just concrete walls, because a lot of the cladding, if it was wood siding, is burned away, the foam is melted away, but now you just have concrete. So from that standpoint, I mean, if you want fire resistance, it's a good option.
For sure.
Great. We've had a few questions, kind of around the sustainability of ICF buildings and walls and the materials and concrete. And I think, it's worth a little mention that, like, how sustainable or green a building isn't just the materials that go into it. It's kind of how long that building lasts. And I also know there are, they're making progress in the concrete and foam world about being more sustainable and a little greener. So Keegan, I'm wondering if you could talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and you talked about, how long these structures last. I mean, you think about all the concrete structures over in Europe, right, that are still standing, after thousands of years or whatever it is, right? So, I mean, as far as ICF, it hasn't been around long enough to really have that set number on, the lifespan of the ICF, but really there is no limit on that. Nudura actually took. We worked with International Living Futures in their Declare program. So we do have a Declare label for our form. So that is a program that we're a part of in declaring, what is within our EPS foam. And you're exactly right. It's always being, progressing and working on, how can we make that a better product.
Andrew, I saw a question that piqued my interest. If you
Absolutely.
is the ICFs seem like a natural for stucco, and how would that be applied? Conventional stucco and a synthetic stucco. Keegan, does Nudura like promote any sort of system like that, or what the process would need to be to prepare the outside face of the forms for that kind of treatment, stucco, either synthetic or concrete stucco?
Sure, Mike. Yeah, and so part of the Tremco Construction Products Group is also Drive It. So that's having the foam there is a great fit, right, for a stucco like that. Typically depending on if you're talking about a TAFs system where they're direct applying to the form, or an EIFS where they're adding additional foam, you're always going to start off by rasping the wall surface, and then a base coat in mesh, and then from there, depending upon, as I said, if it's TAFs or EIFS, it changes a little bit in the installation from there, but that is sort of the base of how that system is started.
And then there's a question similarly about plaster for interior. Is that a similar?
It would be, yeah. I mean, we don't. I don't see it very often, but for sure, that's definitely an option for your interior.
Yeah, I would imagine you could just take some galvanized expanded mesh, attach it right to the wall, and then just do an old-fashioned
Right.
3-coat plaster system. You put on the brown, the scratch coat, the brown coat, then the finished veneer, or any of the newer systems, which wouldn't require all of that, the 3 layers that we used to do, just after horsehair, and then we went into the expanded mesh system until we got to that newfangled drywall stuff.
Right. Great. Let's see. I think we've hit most of the questions, and we're kind of coming up on our time here. Looking for some parting thoughts from you, Mike and Walt.
Sure. So the first thing that I would say is don't be afraid of using ICFs. The first time is going to be a little trying. Make sure you follow some of the guidelines. Call somebody from the manufacturer, but see a project that was done locally. There's enough of them that are around now that it's really easy to jump onto a site or know when one's going to be done. And as builders, we're always willing to have somebody come out onto the site and take a peek at it so that we're all learning, and ask questions to those that have tried it before. I do think it will change the way you're going to use and pour foundations or garages and just small projects to start with, and then you're going to get more and more comfortable with it, and then you'll jump into whole houses and full wall assemblies from footing all the way up to roof lines. I know we're looking to use them more often, and we have finally got back into the market where people are asking for them, so we can add it back into our arsenal and our checklist of products that will be used and recommended from our company. So yeah, embrace them and just learn a little bit more about them, but come out and see one on a job site.
I can't add anything to that. That was so well said.
And then Keegan, we have had a bunch of questions and comments throughout the presentation. If people would like you to answer their questions, what's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think that, I think we'll have the list of questions, and whatever we didn't answer, we can obviously follow up after the webinar. I think Walt hit it, is, don't be afraid to reach out. Nudura's got a ton of resources, whether it be directly with Nudura or through our distributor network. A ton of knowledge with using ICF. So don't be afraid to reach out. And as I mentioned, training, I think, is huge. We do have that course available, and it's something, if you're considering ICF, definitely check that out. It's a great first step in learning obviously more about working with ICF and getting you comfortable with building with ICF for the first time. So.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to thank our sponsor once again, Nudura. That's all the time we have for tonight. So Keegan, Mike, Walt, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everyone for sending your questions, engaging in the webinar conversation. So this will be posted on our website in a few days, and we'll look forward to seeing you all at the next one. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks.